One day. That's all they said she had left. In the top-floor suite of St. Raphael's Hospital, machines hummed like a choir of despair. Victoria Blackwell, heiress to a billion-dollar fortune, watched the color fade from her daughter's lips as the best doctors in America surrendered to science. Outside, under the same window where her wealth couldn't reach, a 14-year-old black boy named Jamal pressed his palms to the cold glass, watching the chaos unfold. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to matter. Yet within 24 hours, the line between privilege and poverty would blur forever. Because sometimes salvation doesn't wear a white coat. But first, please make sure to subscribe the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. Before that night, Jamal's world existed in the forgotten corners of the city, alleys where sirens replaced lullabies and hunger taught patience better than school ever could. At 14, he was already older than his years. His mother cleaned hospital floors until her lungs failed, and when she was gone, no one came to claim him. The system never found room for boys like Jamal, too poor, too dark, too invisible. He spent his days collecting recyclables, his nights wandering near St. Raphael's Hospital, the place where his mother used to mop the marble floors she was never allowed to walk on as a patient. He'd sit outside the service entrance, smelling the expensive meals thrown away from a VIP wing, imagining what it felt like to matter in a world that measured worth in skin tone and credit cards. Inside that same hospital, a different kind of suffering unfolded. Little Isabella Blackwell, only 7, lay surrounded by blinking machines and silent doctors. Her mother, Victoria, had everything money could buy, except time. She'd built her empire on pharmaceutical power, yet now found herself powerless. Every prayer, every phone call, every experimental treatment ended with the same line, "There's nothing more we can do." That night, as the winter wind scraped through the parking lot, Jamal noticed a strange glow through a third-floor window. A child's room. A girl's face pale as moonlight. She was staring back at him. It should have been just another night of being unseen. But that fleeting exchange, a billionaire's daughter and a forgotten boy locking eyes across glass, was about to unravel both their worlds. Because sometimes the people the world discards are the ones fate chooses to rewrite the story. The next morning, Jamal woke up in the same spot he'd fallen asleep, behind the dumpsters near the hospital's service gate, wrapped in a discarded blanket. He rubbed his hands together, trying to chase away the chill. The world inside that hospital felt like another planet, clean, white, untouchable. But something about that girl's eyes from the night before kept haunting him. There was fear there, but also something else. Recognition, as if she'd seen through the walls that separated them. When he returned that afternoon, the hospital was in chaos again. Dozens of black cars lined the entrance, reporters gathered outside. The Blackwell heir still critical, the headlines read. Jamal watched from the curb, invisible as always, until a security guard spotted him. "Hey, you again." The man's tone wasn't surprised, just tired of seeing brown skin where it didn't belong. "You think this is some kind of shelter? Get moving." Jamal tried to explain that he wasn't doing anything wrong, but the guard shoved him back toward the street. "Don't make me call the cops." His hand already rested on his radio. Jamal stepped away slowly. He'd learned early that words didn't protect kids who looked like him. Across the glass walls, Victoria watched the commotion, barely noticing the small figure being pushed away. She was too busy signing forms, approving yet another untested treatment. But nothing worked. Isabella's vitals were failing. And as nurses whisper updates she didn't want to hear, she glanced again toward the parking lot and saw the same boy. For reasons she couldn't explain, that sight brought her a strange calm, as if the universe was trying to tell her something she didn't yet understand. Later that evening, the hospital cafeteria overflowed with food for the night staff. Jamal slipped in quietly, keeping his head low, scavenging what he could before the security rounds began. He wasn't a thief, just hungry. But to the guard who caught him, he was another problem. Another reason for complaints. The man dragged him outside, gripping his arm tighter than necessary. "What's your name, kid?" he sneered. "Jamal," he muttered, eyes down. "Well, Jamal, this place isn't for your kind." That phrase, "your kind," hit like a slap. Not the first time he'd heard it, but somehow it felt heavier here, in front of the building that promised healing to everyone except him. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving him in the freezing dark. Inside, a nurse had seen the whole thing. She hesitated, then slipped a paper bag out the side door later that night. A sandwich, a juice box, and a note. "I'm sorry." Stay strong. Jamal sat on the steps, eating in silence. Above him, lights flickered in the third-floor window. He looked up just as Isabella's monitors began to beep in warning. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders. He couldn't hear the words, but he could feel the panic. Something inside him told him not to leave. For hours, he waited in the cold while the world inside the glass fought to keep the little girl alive. When the lights finally dimmed, he whispered a quiet prayer, the same one his mother used to say when the world forgot them. At that moment, in the emptiness of the night, something shifted. A decision, unspoken but certain, formed in his heart. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just watch. Tomorrow, he'd find a way inside. The next morning, the hospital was locked down. Isabella's condition had plummeted overnight. Doctors gathered in the hallway, whispering words like organ failure and final hours. Victoria stood frozen by the glass, her reflection hollow, her fortune meaningless. Outside, the news vans circled like vultures, waiting for tragedy. Jamal watched from behind the gate, his heart pounding. He didn't know medicine, but he knew pain. He'd seen people give up when the world gave up on them. He couldn't explain why, but something inside told him he couldn't let her die alone, not while he still had breath. When a delivery van pulled up, Jamal seized his moment. He slipped through the half-open loading dock, ducked behind boxes, and followed the service corridor up the stairs. The smell of disinfectant burned his throat, but he kept going, one silent step at a time. On the third floor, alarms screamed through the air. Nurses rushed past him, too panicked to notice the boy standing barefoot in the corridor. Through the glass door, he saw Isabella, pale, motionless, surrounded by frantic doctors. Then came the voice. Harsh. Angry. What is he doing here? A security guard barked, spotting him. Every head turned. For a moment, time stopped, a black boy standing in a world that was never meant to see him. He's not supposed to be here, another nurse shouted, blocking his path. But before they could drag him away, Isabella's monitors flatlined. Victoria screamed. Jamal broke free. He pressed his hand to the glass, tears streaming down his face. Please, he whispered, though no one could hear. He closed his eyes, whispering the same prayer his mother had taught him, the one that had carried him through nights of hunger and fear. And then the room went still. A soft tone replaced the flat line. The monitors flickered back to life. Gasps echoed. Isabella's pulse had returned. Doctors scrambled, shouting for confirmation. No one understood what had happened, but Victoria did. Her gaze locked on Jamal, trembling, speechless. The boy who wasn't supposed to matter had just defied the impossible. When the chaos settled, the truth became impossible to ignore. Isabella opened her eyes hours later, weak but alive. Doctors called it a spontaneous recovery. The media called it a miracle. But Victoria Blackwell couldn't forget the image burned into her mind, the trembling boy behind the glass, praying through his tears. For the first time in her life, the woman who had built an empire on control realized how powerless she had been and how much she owed to someone society had already written off. Jamal didn't wait for cameras or thanks. He slipped away quietly before the morning light, unnoticed as always. No headlines carried his name. No statue was built in his honor. But something in that hospital changed that night. Victoria demanded the hospital board open its doors to children from the city's poorest neighborhoods. She funded free clinics in areas that once turned patients away for lack of insurance. And she told every journalist who'd listened that salvation sometimes wears the face of a forgotten child. Months later, a photo surfaced, a grainy shot from the hospital's security feed. It showed a barefoot boy standing by the ICU window, his hand pressed to glass, the word miracle flashing faintly on the monitor inside. That image went viral. To some, it was faith. To others, fate. But to anyone who looked closer, it was a reminder of something deeper, that humanity has no price tag and that compassion cannot be measured in skin color or wealth. Jamal was never found, but maybe that's the point. Maybe he wasn't meant to be. Because the miracle he left behind wasn't just a heartbeat restored, it was a conscience awakened. So ask yourself, how many Jamals walk past us every day, unseen, unheard, yet holding the power to change the world?